Tonight, Senate sets the stage for e-voting and e-transmission of election results as it reverses itself on Electoral Act Amendment Bill. The President promises to build a more resilient economy, also to implement fiscal measures to improve domestic revenues and mobilize external funding. One soldier killed as police and army repel attack by gunmen at the venue of All Progressives Grand Alliance rally in Anambra State. And Kenya kicks following the International Court of Justice verdict on border dispute with Somalia. Plus international news from our studio in London.
On business news tonight, International Monetary Fund revises global growth outlook for 2021, projects 5.9% for Nigeria's economy.
And on sports news tonight, Super Falcons coach Randy Waldrum picks 23 players for the 2022 Women's African qualifying fixture against the Black Queens of Ghana later this month.
And from the Federal Capital Territory, it's a sad day in Kaduna State as gunmen invade school, abduct 3 students from St. Albert Catholic Seminary in Jamal local government area.
The Senate has bowed to pressure and made a U-turn in its decision on the electronic transmission of election results by the Independent National Electoral Commission. This comes against its earlier position in which INEC was allowed to consider e-transmission of results only if the national network coverage was certified adequate and secure by the National Communications Commission and approved by the National Assembly. But at the resumption of plenary for the week, the upper chamber empowered the electoral umpire to determine the procedure for the transmission of results during elections. Our correspondent Linda Kigwe reports.
The Electoral Act Amendment Bill is one of the most polarizing pieces of legislation in the 9th Assembly. Clause 52, which refers to electronic transmission of results, split lawmakers in the Senate sharply along party lines to the extent that a division was called on the vote for the first time in the 9th Assembly.
Say aye. Those against say nay. The nays have it.
After the public vote on Clause 52, the Senate approved that INEC may consider electronic transmission of results, provided the national coverage is adjudged to be adequate and secure by the National Communications Commission, NCC, and approved by the National Assembly. This amendment caused uncertainty in the public space as to the intention of Parliament in promoting credible elections and the fate of electronic transmission of results in future elections. Fast forward to Tuesday's plenary session. The Senate is reversing its decision and is giving electoral umpire INEC the free rein to determine the procedure of transmission of results during elections.
Voting at an election and transmission of results under this bill shall be in accordance with the procedure determined by the Commission.
Those in favor of Clause 52 as amended, say aye. Those against say nay. The ayes have it.
The Senate also re-amended Clause 43, 63 and 87. Clause 87 refers to the procedure for party primaries, which the previous amendment prescribes direct and indirect primaries. The latest amendment is prescribing direct primaries for political parties.
I hold the view, Mr. President, that it is more cheaper, less cumbersome to have indirect primary elections.
If this our democracy will be strengthened, if this our democracy will grow, and if we are going to be able to take it to anything close to global best practice standards, it is time for us to adopt direct mode of primaries.
Those in favor of the amendment to Clause 87, 4, say aye. Those against say nay. The nays have it.
Briefing journalists after plenary, the Senate spokesperson throws more light on the re-amendment of the Electoral Act bill.
This would allow INEC, when they have the necessary wherewithal and competence, they don't need to come back for us to introduce electronic voting, machine as part of the materials they will use for election.
The Senate's latest amendment of Section 52 to empower INEC to determine the procedure of transmission of results during elections is sure to delight many Nigerians and those in the civic space who had been agitating for a reversal of the earlier decision. Linda Akibe, Channels Television News.
Meanwhile, the River State Governor, Nyesom Wike, has reacted to today's decision by the Senate on the e-transmission of election results as a welcome development. Governor Wike says if adopted by INEC, the process will build trust in the electoral system, thereby reducing the rate of electoral violence and litigations in the country. He, however, urged the National Assembly not to decide for political parties the method to be adopted in the conduct of their primary election, following the recommendations and some clauses in the Electoral Act Repeal and Reenactment Bill.
Now that results will transmit electronically, no way for rigging. Only those who support rigging are against results to be transmitted electronically. If any politician wants it sought, believes that he or she has done well for him or his people or our people, you will know that that politician will not be afraid to say, whichever way you want to transmit the result, I'm available for it. I'm available. But I want it to be transparent. I want confidence, for people to have confidence on the electoral system, to help INEC, so that nobody who goes to attack INEC officials. Party could adopt a method, procedure in electing who represent them at various levels. That is not for the National Assembly to dictate, to say, look, you must do it by direct or indirect. No. That's not democracy. Let the party, that should be an internal affair of the party. How do we elect those who will represent us? Is it by direct method or by indirect? That shouldn't be for the Electoral Act to provide, as far as I'm concerned. I will also think that the National Assembly should look at it that doing that is interfering in the internal politics of the parties, and that will not go well.
And to legal matters, the 300-level mass communication student of the University of Lagos, Chidinma Ojukwu, and one Adedapo Quadri, both key suspects in the alleged murder of the chief executive officer of Super TV, Usifo Ataga, have been arraigned before a Lagos High Court sitting in Tafawa Balewa Square. The murder was said to have been committed in a service apartment in the Lekki area of Lagos. Our judiciary correspondent, Shola Shuyele, reports.
Following the advice of the Lagos State Director of Public Prosecution, DPP, the police withdrew from the prosecution of Chidinma and others indicted in the murder of the late Usifo Ataga. The DPP, Mrs. Olayinka Adeyemi, swiftly filed a 9-count charge against Chidinma, her suspected key accomplice Adedapo Quadri, and her sister Chioma Egbuchu, from whom the late Ataga's iPhone 7 was said to have been recovered. In the charge dated August 31st, Chidinma and Adedapo, listed as the first and second defendants, were named in counts 1 to 7, bordering on offenses of conspiracy, murder, and forgery. They were specifically alleged to have murdered Ataga by stabbing him several times on the neck and chest with a knife. The charge also specifically alleged that they procured false access and UBA bank account statements of the late Ataga. They also allegedly forged an international passport and a driver's license in Chidinma's name. Chidinma was named as the sole defendant in count 8 for committing the offense of stealing. She allegedly stole 2 iPhones, an iPhone 7 and an iPhone 11. 1 Apple MacBook laptop, and ATM cards of Access and GT banks belonging to the late Usifo Ataga, from which the sum of 380,000 naira was subsequently withdrawn. In count 9, Chidinma's sister Chioma Egbuchu was charged with being in possession of the stolen iPhone 7. When all the counts were read to the defendants, they all pleaded not guilty. After arraignment, Justice Adesanya ordered the continued remand of Chidinma and Adedapo in custody, while the sister Chioma was allowed to continue on the bail earlier granted to her at the magistrate court. The judge has picked 8 trial dates spanning a 2-week period to allow for an accelerated hearing of the case. Shola Shoyeli, Channels Television News.
Still on the judiciary, but outside Nigeria, the ex-leader of the movement for the emancipation of the Niger Delta, Henry Okah, has lost yet another bid to get out of jail. He had brought 3 applications before Judge Mabit Sela of the Johannesburg High Court in September, one for bail, one for leave to appeal his conviction, and another for reservation on a question of law. He opted to start with the bail application, saying he needed to be free in order to challenge his conviction. Our Johannesburg Bureau Chief Betty Dibia reports.
That this is a bail application pending an application for leave to appeal his trial and conviction here in South Africa in 2012. In his judgment, Judge Mabit Sela dismissed the application, saying that the applicant failed to show exceptional circumstances that would justify bail. He said issues like the standing conviction and sentence, the likely residence while on bail, and the safety and security of Mr. Okah while on bail, as he himself had raised, were hanging in the balance. Judge Mabit Sela also pointed out that the issue of keloids, a skin condition Mr. Okah is suffering from, is not life-threatening, as his own doctor had told the court. To Mr. Okah, who thanked the judge for giving him a fair hearing, the fight continues, as he told his wife Azuka, who was present in court, that he would be headed to the Supreme Court of Appeal next. But his lawyer told Channels Television that before they get to that, they still need to approach a Johannesburg High Court for leave to appeal first. He also admitted that Okah may have put the cart before the horse by applying for bail first, before leave to appeal his conviction. It is noteworthy that Henry Okah, according to the law, could be eligible for parole in a little over 3 years' time. But he says he will continue fighting against his conviction because he wants to clear his name. From the South Gauteng High Court, Johannesburg, South Africa, Betty Dibia, Channels Television News.
A COVID-19 booster may be necessary for residents to stay safe from the global pandemic. This is according to the Lagos State Commissioner for Health, Professor Akin Abayomi, who announced this during a briefing ahead of the 7th One Health and Biosecurity Conference. Professor Abayomi says the state government plans to vaccinate 30% of its residents by the end of the year, and says the conference will address biosecurity threats as well as other contagious diseases.
You may require a booster, which is a first, second, and then subsequent doses, because we've also discovered that even though the vaccine stops you from getting seriously sick, it may not necessarily stop you from catching COVID. We do know that some people, even who are fully vaccinated with 2 doses, will still catch COVID, and some people, very few, but some people will get quite sick, and occasionally some people may die. But certainly the people that are dying who are not vaccinated are much higher than the people who are dying who have been vaccinated. So we know that the vaccine is certainly protecting populations from severe disease and death. So the question is, as the virus is changing, it may require that we need to give you more than 2 doses. And definitely scientists around the world are toying with that idea that a 3rd or a 4th dose may be required. Now that's not very different from the flu. You all know that the flu vaccine needs to be updated every year if you want to protect yourself. So if you got the flu vaccine last year, you need to get another one this year, because every year the flu itself is mutating. And so what you were vaccinated against last year is not going to protect you from this year's flu. So the same thing with COVID-19. It is possible that over time, the original vaccine is not going to be effective against the mutating virus. And so we will need to develop an updated and upgraded vaccine to protect you from the evolving and the mutating strains of COVID-19.
In part two, after the break, the president promises to build a more resilient economy, marking an end to the two-day midterm ministerial performance review retreat in Abuja. Please stay with us. Welcome back. You're watching the news at 10 live on Channels Television Lagos. A reminder of our top stories. Senate sets the stage for e-voting and e-transmission of election results as it reverses itself on Electoral Act Amendment Bill. The president promises to build a more resilient economy, also to implement fiscal measures to improve domestic revenues and mobilize external funding. One soldier killed as police and army repel attack by gunmen at the venue of the All Progressives Grand Alliance rally in Anambra State. And Kenya kicks following the International Court of Justice verdict on border dispute with Somalia. And today marked the end of the two-day midterm ministerial performance review retreat, where the president promised that his administration will build a more resilient economy, especially as the country recovers from the coronavirus pandemic. The president also instructed the ministers to ramp up implementation of their mandates along the 9 priority areas of his leadership. Our State House correspondent Gloria Mezuke reports.
Stock-taking continues in day 2 of the Ministerial Performance Review retreat at the State House. This critical review in the President's last lap is also attended by the leadership of the National Assembly. Reeling points of refocus after over 6 hours behind closed doors, the President issues fresh charges to all government officials while outlining a structure to improve the fight against corruption.
In the last 2 years of implementing our policies, programs and projects will serve as the needed tool to propel every ministry to remain committed. I therefore charge all of you to step up, double your efforts, and work in synergy towards total delivery of our administration's set target.
Among the areas of renewed concentration for the president is enlarging agricultural output for food security and export, among others.
Efforts will be geared towards removing all bottlenecks that militate against access to government support schemes by SMEs. Let me assure Nigerians that this administration will continue to implement fiscal measures to improve our domestic revenues and mobilize external funding support to build a more resilient economy. There must be synergy between the fiscal and monetary authorities to keep the economy on the trajectory of growth.
In a bid to advance the nation's growth trajectory, several sessions chaired by guest speakers who took turns to evaluate challenges and suggest lessons to be learned, one of which is the high cost of trade. The numbers, according to the Director General of the World Trade Organization, are 1.5 times higher than trade costs in high-income countries.
Nigeria's trade costs are too high. According to the World Bank ESCAP trade cost database for 2019, trade costs for African countries are on average the equivalent of a 304% tariff. And for Nigeria, it's even slightly higher at 306%. Such high costs are not conducive to forming regional value chains.
At the end of the 2-day retreat, the ministers appeared confident about the outcome.
Areas that we felt ministers did not do well, of course they have time in the next 6 months to correct them.
So this president is going to finish very strong.
The president has just directed the ministry to come up with a legislative framework that will be backed by legislation to sustain the funding of the social investment program.
I think there are certain things that didn't come up in the retreat. One of them is the process of procurement. The procurement law needs to be tweaked and adjusted to make for faster delivery of projects.
Expectations have now surged with the president's renewed charge and determination to achieve set targets by 2023. No doubt the outcome of this ministerial retreat will influence largely the performance at the ministry's departments and agencies. From the presidential villa, Gloria Umezuke, Channels Television News.
And to security, at least one person is feared killed after some unidentified gunmen attacked the venue of a rally organized by the All Progressives Grand Alliance, ABGA, in Ihiala local government area of Anambra State today. It was gathered that the gunmen stormed Oduata Primary School in 3 vehicles and a number of motorcycles. Commenting on the incident, the State Commissioner for Information denied that Governor Obiano's convoy was attacked. He explained that following the exchange of fire between the gunmen and security forces, the attackers fled into a nearby hospital premises directly opposite the campaign ground. The police spokesperson of the Anambra Command says a combined team of policemen and military personnel repelled the attack and recovered 1 AK-47 rifle, 2 magazines with 30 rounds of ammunition and 4 vehicles. He also added that normalcy has been restored to the area and asked residents to report anyone found with gunshot wounds as the police are currently trailing the fleeing gang members. Let's go over to our Abuja studios where we have more stories. Here's Terry Kumi. Hi, Terry.
Hello, Millicent. We continue with security, this time in Kaduna State, where gunmen suspected to be kidnappers have attacked St. Albert the Great Institute of Philosophy, a Catholic Church-owned seminary in Jama local government area. The gunmen were said to have abducted 3 students before the arrival of local vigilantes who were able to repel them and prevent them from taking any more students. It was gathered that on Monday night, the gunmen invaded the school and started shooting sporadically, creating panic among the students and staff. Spokesman of the State Police Command, Mohammed Jalige, put the number of students kidnapped at 3, with 2 others injured, adding that a tactical team has visited the school to get more details about the incident. Meanwhile, 3 members of a gang allegedly responsible for the kidnap of 8 people from the National Center for Tuberculosis and Leprosy quarters in Kaduna State have been arrested by the police. Parading the suspects in Abuja alongside 45 others, the Force Public Relations Officer, Frank Mba, says the gang also kidnapped and killed a female pharmacist at the Ahmadu Bello University Teaching Hospital in Zaria. Our correspondent Emperor Simon reports.
It's not a lucky day for these suspects now in police custody. 48 of them in total are being paraded for various offenses.
1 GPMG, 3 AK-47 rifles, 9 AK-49 rifles.
36-year-old Abubakar Aliru from Zaria is arrested for allegedly setting up his cousin, 48-year-old Binta Amza, for abduction after he refused to pay back the loan she gave him to purchase 4 tricycles for his business.
Aliru, clearly not intending to return to pay back this loan, lured this relative of his out of Zaria, and in that process, simply handed over Binta to a gang of kidnappers.
In July this year, the police command in Kaduna State confirmed the kidnap of 8 people from the National Center for Tuberculosis and Leprosy quarters in Zaria. This suspect, who is part of a kidnap syndicate operating in Galadima Forest in the area, says he took part in the operation, including the killing of a female pharmacist working with the Ahmadu Bello Teaching Hospital, Zaria. Salisu Abdullahi, a father of 3 from Kagarko local government area of Kaduna State, and 21-year-old Babangida Usman are allegedly part of a dangerous gang operating in northwest and north-central Nigeria and are responsible for several abductions, including a Catholic priest.
This gang is responsible for the kidnap of Reverend Father Tony Bauer, a Catholic priest that was sometime kidnapped. Thank God he came out alive.
The police say investigations are ongoing to unravel more facts of their crimes, and the suspects will soon be charged to court. Emperor Simon, Channels Television News.
When the news at 10 returns, International Monetary Fund cuts global growth outlook, projects Nigeria's economy to grow by 5.9% this year. That's on Business News. Join us again. Welcome back to the news at 10. Let's return to the National Assembly, where lawmakers in the House of Representatives have adopted 2 reports of its committees on the establishment of the Southeast and Southwest Development Commissions. This follows the resolve of the House to ensure that no part of the country is left out and each region gets a development commission. The commissions are to receive and manage funds from the federal allocation, as well as gifts and donations, and utilize same for infrastructural development of the regions. Meanwhile, following complaints by lawmakers over non-functioning air conditioners in the chamber, the House of Representatives had to hurriedly conclude scheduled matters during today's plenary, as the Speaker directed the Clerk of the House to ensure that the air conditioning was fixed for Wednesday's plenary. Away from the National Assembly, the Nigeria Customs Service has threatened to impound 29 luxury jets of some prominent Nigerians over failure to pay statutory duties. This comes on the heels of the release of its report on the verification of privately owned airplanes in the country. The Customs Service announced that the Federal Airport Authority of Nigeria has been put on notice to ensure that only privately owned airplanes cleared by customs are allowed to operate within the country's airspace. From its report, 57 commercial charter operators have been duly cleared for operations. That's all from the nation's capital. Business News is next with Teniola Shobowale.
Banking so easy, so simple. Dial *894# now to experience it. You first, First Bank.
Thanks a lot, Terry. Welcome to Business News. The International Monetary Fund has trimmed its global growth outlook, citing persistent supply chain disruptions and pricing pressures as constraints to recovery. In its World Economic Outlook, the IMF cut its 2021 global growth forecast to 5.9% from the 6.0% forecast it made in July. It left its 2022 global growth forecast unchanged at 4.9%. Our business correspondent, Chimize Obiwagu, who is attending the IMF World Bank annual meeting in Washington, D.C., now reports.
This is the Pennsylvania Avenue in Washington, D.C. that houses the IMF and the World Bank. If you're a regular attendee of the annual meetings or even the spring meetings, you would know that it is still not business as usual, as the pandemic has forced the events to be held virtually. However, the difference this time is that it is hybrid, as some member countries like Nigeria have been invited for in-person meetings. The Minister of Finance and the Central Bank Governor will be leading the Nigerian delegation. All seem set to welcome the delegates that will be attending this year's annual meeting in person. Security operatives are positioned at various strategic points to maintain law and order. The statutory meetings are majorly held behind closed doors, with governors of central banks and finance ministers of member countries in attendance. It is basically to discuss the world economic outlook, growth issues, inflation, exchange rate, and financial system stability issues in different countries. One of the major highlights is the forecast for the world's economy, which has been downgraded to 5.9% from July forecast of 6% as global recovery continues, but momentum weakens.
One of the major risks remains that there could be new variants of the virus that could further slow back the recovery. We're seeing major supply disruptions around the world that are also feeding inflationary pressures, which are quite high. And financial risk-taking also is increasing, which poses an additional risk to the outlook.
The IMF calls for more actions by the global community.
The foremost priority is to vaccinate the world. Much greater multilateral action is needed to vaccinate at least 40% of the population in every country by the end of this year and 70% by the middle of next year. We also need much greater action to address climate change. Individual countries will need to tailor their fiscal and monetary policy to the country's specific conditions, to the health conditions in their country, to their economic conditions, while also maintaining the credibility of their fiscal and monetary frameworks.
Sub-Saharan Africa is projected to grow by 3.7% in 2021 and 3.8% in 2022, while Nigeria is expected to grow by 2.6% in 2021 and 2.7% in 2022. From Washington, D.C., Chimezie Obi Iwagu reporting for Channels Television News.
And back here, the domestic bourse reversed the losses recorded on Monday by a wider margin, and bar cement is the major factor behind today's rebound. Layo Adigoke tells us more.
Thank you for joining us for the stock market report. The equities market displayed its dynamic nature at the close of today's trading session as its key indicator returned to positive territory after Monday's dismal performance. Well, now more than 95 billion naira was added to the total value of listed equities after investors renewed their interest for the shares of Boa Cement, FBN and 25 other equities across the 5 key sectors. Well, the result is a 0.45% increase rebound on the all-share index. Now, let's take a look at the activity chart. Volume of shares transaction was higher by 194.75% in contrast to the previous session, and that represents a total of 563.88 million equities traded. Value was up by 96.72%, but the deals were lower by 3.25%. FBN Holdings is still holding the #1 spot. On the top trades list, Champion Breweries led the gainers, while Consolidated Hallmark is top among 13 losers. And that's it on the stock market report. I'm Layo Adegoke.
Thanks a lot, Layo. On the other hand, it's a negative close for major global stock markets, and that's in reaction to rising oil prices, while investors await key inflation data from the United States. But here are some snapshots of their closing numbers. And that's business news tonight. It's back to Millicent for the rest of the news at 10.
Banking, so easy, so simple. Dial *894# now to experience it. You first, First Bank.
Thank you, Tony. Political violence, social insecurity and crimes are some of the social vices associated with youth unemployment, but these can be tackled through adequate investment in education and support to medium, small and micro entrenches. Well, this formed the thrust of conversations at a public lecture organised by the Foursquare Gospel Church in Lagos.
And I went through all the universities.
It's the 8th in the series of the Foursquare annual lecture, having in attendance public office holders, church leaders and private sector players
including the former governor of Anambra State, Mr. Peter Obi, and the chairman, Channels Media Group, Mr. John Momo.
Leave what you had in mind is non-formal.
The choice of this year's theme reflects one of the issues currently confronting Nigeria as a nation, insecurity, and according to the General Overseer of the Church, Reverend Sam Abuyeji, the public lecture represents the Church's contribution to the quest for growth and the development of Nigeria.
We are looking forward to enduring, sustainable and prosperous societies which are founded and built on some important pillars of virtues of patriotism and integrity, among others. The country which we all desire as a church and as a people can only be achieved upon these foundations.
The subject matter gives the hint that the neglect of the youth may be a major cause of the nation's current security challenges.
Journalist, friend, brother, and mentor.
With statistics and empirical evidence, the chairman of the occasion, Mr. John Momo, outlines the risk factor of insecurity and what relevant institutions can do to save the nation.
Today, our youths are preoccupied with an endless battle for survival. It's perpetual, it is fierce, and it is sometimes a gruesome battle that makes it impossible for them to get ahead in life. And the result is total alienation of our youths and a non-existent faith in the system. The youths have become hopeless, they become hapless, and they're unable to progress for only a few of them can forge ahead, either through sheer luck, ingenuity, or because of favorable family background.
While there can be no justification for crime, the rise in unemployment suggests leadership failure. That's the thought of the keynote speaker, Mr. Peter Obi.
If you have good government or good leadership, like you see what is happening today, you will have good economy, there will be provision of basic services, there will be security of life and property, and vice versa. And you will see it when I explain it. The cumulative effect of what you have seen in Nigeria today is leadership failure over the years.
Mr. Obi argues that youth's neglect is evidenced by inadequate investment in education and micro, small and medium enterprises.
Today, the neglect of our youth by our country not investing, one, in education, which is the most critical component of human development, and two, investing in the engine, which the chairman mentioned, that drives employment and economy, micro, small, medium enterprises, have created a pool of unemployed and underemployed youth.
Other speakers also expressed their thoughts on the matter, offering possible solutions to youth unrest.
Let us devote at least 30% of our budgetary allocation to education.
The Foursquare Annual Lecture is a prelude to its 66th annual convention. It's expected that the thoughts and recommendations from here would reach relevant authorities and assist them to shape solution-driven policies in tackling the security challenges in Nigeria.
Still ahead on the news at 10, United Nations Court rules largely in favor of Somalia in its long-running dispute with Kenya over their maritime border. Please join us again. And it's a ruling that is largely in favor of Somalia in its long-running dispute with Kenya over their maritime border. Let's head over to our London studios where Simon Pusey has more international news around the world in 5.
Good evening and welcome to the Channel studios here in London with your international news around the world in 5. North Korea's leader Kim Jong-un has vowed to build what he calls an invincible military. His comments came during the Self-Defense 2021 exhibition held in the North's capital, Pyongyang, where Mr. Kim added that this weapons development is made for a self-defense reason and not to start a war with the neighbor. Meanwhile, South Korea has recently tested its submarine-launched weapon, further increasing tensions. In his speech, the leader accused the US of fueling animosity between the North and South. At least 9 people have been killed and 16 others are missing in the Philippines as a tropical cyclone named Kompasu caused flooding and landslides. Local media reports more than 2,000 people have been evacuated in several towns as they were battered by pouring rains and winds that toppled trees and knocked down power. Footage showed rescue personnel helping people trapped in the rushing waters get to dry land. With maximum sustained winds of 100 kilometers per hour, the cyclone had absorbed remnants of an earlier cyclone before making landfall. A small aircraft has crashed near San Diego, killing at least 2 people and injuring 2 others, while also destroying several homes. At least 2 homes appeared to have been completely destroyed by an ensuing fire in the city of Santee in California. Pictures show the scene of devastation, with one neighbor describing it as looking like a war zone. This footage from a house doorbell shows the moment the plane came down. Plumes of smoke could be seen from miles away. The C-340 twin-engine plane is thought to have had issues and was trying to land. It was not immediately clear how many people were on board the plane. A report by MPs says the UK's failure to do more to stop COVID spreading early in the pandemic was one of the worst ever public health failures. The government's decisions, backed by scientists, led to a delay in introducing the first lockdown, which cost tens of thousands of lives. But the report highlights successes too, including the vaccination rollout. From the research and development through to the rollout of the jabs, it described the process as one of the most effective initiatives in UK history. The UN Human Rights Office has called for prompt, thorough, impartial and independent investigations into the use of disproportionate force by Libyan authorities against migrants. A UN rights spokeswoman said armed forces in Tripoli began a series of mass arrests a week earlier, detaining more than 4,000 people in overcrowded detention centres. Hundreds of migrants and refugees were waiting outside a United Nations centre in Tripoli on Sunday to seek help in leaving Libya. The migrants say they have faced violent abuse and extortion in a country that has become a major transit point for people seeking to reach Europe. At least 25 people have been killed and many others injured in a bus crash in northwest Nepal, that's according to police. Images published by local media showed the crushed wreckage of an overturned bus. The vehicle was travelling through Mugu district when it left the road shortly after midday. The cause of the crash is unclear, but some reports suggest the bus may have had an issue with its brakes failing. Britain's Prince Charles has called for clean energy and an end to coal-fired plants during a speech given to the COP15 Biodiversity Summit.
To accelerate our efforts further.
In a video message, the second in line to the throne called for polluters to pay more for the carbon they emit. At the same summit, which is officially being held in Kunming, Chinese President Xi Jinping announced the launch of a 1.5 billion yuan fund to support biodiversity protection in developing countries. Footage has been released of a very lucky escape for a patrol officer and driver in Florida. From a police dash cam, it shows a car driver in the middle of the highway speaking to an officer. From nowhere, a sedan car smashes into the parked one. The officer was unharmed, with the driver of the parked car suffering minor injuries. And finally, fishermen and residents in Havana have joined forces to protect manatees, a species of marine fauna that is in a very critical situation. Sighted in several coastal cities in Cuba, the West Indian is a mammal that lives in shallow waters and estuaries. Their slow movements have made them an easy species to be caught by illegal fishermen. Now locals and licensed fishermen have teamed up to report any instances of illegal poaching. Experts consider manatees to be true jewels of marine biodiversity. And that's your international news around the world in 5. Now back to the Channel studios in Lagos.
Welcome to Sports News. Super Falcons coach Randy Waldrum has called up 23 Super Falcons players to camp in preparations for their 2022 Women African qualifying fixture against the Black Queens of Ghana on October the 20th in Lagos. The first leg will be played at the Mobolaji Johnson Arena in Oniko, while the return leg will be played in Accra on October the 24th. And Barcelona have been given the green lights to fill their Camp Nou stadium to capacity for key Champions League and La Liga matches next week, after Catalonia authorities earlier today eased the COVID-19 crowd limits from 60% capacity. The decision is timely for struggling Barcelona, who have 3 games coming up in 8 days at the 99,000 capacity Camp Nou. And that will be all on Sports News.
And the main news again, the Senate today reversed itself on Electoral Act Amendment Bill, set the stage for e-voting and e-transmission of election results. That's news at 10 tonight. Thank you for watching. I'm Minister Okah. Have a good night. Stay safe.